Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents Deciding Who Leads: How Executive Recruiters Drive, Direct, and Disrupt the Global Search for Leadership Talent, by Joseph Daniel McCool. Narrated by Richard Lyddon.
Forward by John A. Byrne, Executive Editor, Business Week. I have only a quintessential headhunter to blame for it, the it being my endless fascination for the mysterious executive search business that remains today a relatively puny part of global management consulting. Nearly a quarter-century ago, I met my first executive search consultant, one of the world's best and best known. He had just completed one of the most celebrated searches ever, finding a chief executive for an extraordinary entrepreneur by the name of Steve Jobs at a fledgling company called Apple Computer. And I was dispatched to report and craft a profile for Forbes magazine. When I walked through the doors of his search firm's modern offices on Park Avenue in New York, I was prepared for the expected charm offensive. But it didn't take long for this sceptical reporter to be won over. The man himself arrived with a generous smile, a firm handshake, and the self-confidence that comes to those at the top of their game. He regaled me with tales of success and failure, of his behind-the-curtain role as matchmaker in dozens of high-profile CEO searches, of his humble beginnings, of his belief that nothing was more important in business than leadership. He was urbane, witty, thoughtful, even spiritual, the quintessential people person. He asked you about your own personal journey, your upbringing, your family, your goals and your dreams. He took you into his confidence, and it was a comfortable place to be. His powers of observation were acute. All these years later, I still remember that he noted the cut and styling of my well-pressed Brooks Brothers suit, as if he was building my ego as a candidate for some future search assignment. Not surprisingly, I wrote a fairly positive story, my first of many on the business of executive search consulting and the people engaged in it. That first formative interview with the gregarious Jerry Roach led me to think that it would be easy work to meet many other fun-loving, high-spirited executive search characters, and so I jumped at the chance to write a book about this fascinating world. Published 2 years later, in 1986, The Headhunters became something of a cult classic among the hunted and the hunters. The book gained a worldwide audience with far more impact than I ever imagined. Even today, I meet people who tell me they not merely read the book, they were inspired to make bold choices in their professional lives. Many left their corporate jobs to become executive search consultants. So, it is with delight and much satisfaction that I read the work of another journalist, far more knowledgeable than I about executive search, who has chosen to take this first deep dive in 22 years into a fascinating and critical business. The result: Deciding Who Leads by Joseph Daniel McCool. It is an impressive work, based on interviews with many in and outside the business and on Joe's own experiences, including his 8 years as editor of Executive Recruiter News. The book also draws on Joe's most recent work as a writer and worldwide lecturer, and advocate for executive recruiting best practices. This book could not have arrived at a more opportune moment. We live in a world that would greatly benefit from strong and smart leadership in all our companies, organizations, and governments. As Deciding Who Leads so clearly details, what great leaders do is give purpose and direction to endeavor. They see a path ahead, a way to move forward, and they mobilize the people and the resources necessary for meaningful accomplishment. They inspire. They make magic happen. Anyone who has ever been fortunate to work for an authentic leader knows this in his or her bones. Great leadership is no small task in a world as truly complicated as the one in which we now live. Competition is fierce, interests are divergent, self-interest is the predominant mindset. And we have clearly seen the result of bad and ineffective leadership, something that is always in evidence. We've seen too many executives who are ambitious for themselves and not their companies or their people, We've seen too many executives who have abused their power and influence, who have violated our sense of ethics, of integrity, of values. And we have seen far too many executives who are charlatans, who lack the brains, the energy, the desire to truly lead. Joe McCool takes us behind the scenes of executive search and reveals that what the best executive search consultants do is find and deliver extraordinary leadership talent. And no less crucial, they help make the connections that keep bad and ineffective people out of power. Of course, as Deciding Who Leads also details, it doesn't always work that way. Joe reveals the miscalculations, misfits, and mistakes of executive search. Few matches are perfect, and Joe gives us the good, the bad, the ugly, and the uglier. Best of all, he describes what the executive search world needs to do to live up to its awesome responsibilities, and what hiring organizations who engage executive search consultants need to do to improve their relationship and the results of leadership recruiting. More often than not, executive search consulting is a business that gets it right. It's why executive recruiting has emerged into a much more significant and influential profession than it was when I first delved into it all those years ago. Thanks to Joe McCool for this insightful insider look at where the business stands today and where it needs to go in the future. Enjoy. Introduction. Leadership, recruiting, and succession rank as the most pivotal agendas for today's growth-minded, change-oriented organizations. Given the risks and rewards inherent in senior management recruiting, deciding who leads is the quintessential challenge faced by boards of directors, senior corporate officers, and division or line managers around the world. Their organizations' futures are cast in the investments they make or fail to make in leadership recruiting, development, and retention. Human capital is, after all, the most critical intangible asset riding on corporate balance sheets, and executive recruiters occupy a unique brokerage position from which to drive, direct, and disrupt the global search for leadership talent. The invisible force. With the demands of leadership at an all-time high and executive tenure at a record low, executive search consulting is the single most influential form of management consulting engaged by organizations. Working out of sight of public scrutiny, executive search consultants are an invisible force at the center of the global competition for the best leadership. They quietly influence executive compensation, management turnover, leadership development, and even employers' definitions of leadership. This at a time when these topics are increasingly the subject of media reports, shareholder meetings, and the everyday concerns of consumers, employees, academics, consultants, managers, and social researchers. These consultants' experience, networks, opinions, gut judgments, and, yes, biases collectively set the course and usually preordain the outcome of a search for leadership advantage. Executive search consulting has been described by more than one of its practitioners as the ultimate consulting business. And the truth is that no other professional services business has anywhere near its multi-billion-dollar global impact on organizational performance, culture, and profits. Search consultants regularly move the financial markets when they recruit talented people to high-profile corporate leadership positions. And they similarly depreciate shareholder value when they lure a top executive away from an employer or when they accelerate or facilitate the exodus of key executives from a troubled company. Agents of creative and destructive influence. So how should we judge those whose judgments so invisibly and routinely alter the course of global business? By virtue of their core matchmaking purpose, their track records, their own operating styles, and hiring organizations' widespread lack of sophistication when it comes to engaging them, executive search consultants are cast as both heroes and villains. If decisions about people were easy, and if these most influential of management consultants brought universal credibility and absolute consistency, theirs would be a widely understood and much celebrated element of modern-day business building. But that's not the case. Expensive recruiters orchestrate a mutual commitment process that is both art and science, and all parties to it must recognize that it is imperfect, as is all human behavior. Executive search consultants are most appreciated when they serve as talent Sherpas, trusted knowledge leaders guiding hiring organizations through the unfamiliar and difficult terrain of the global market for leadership talent. They are most despised when they recruit key executives out of organizations that desperately need them, and when they make an imperfect judgment about an imperfect executive who turns out to be a misfit with a hiring organization. The executive search profession summons people of great ambition who find professional fulfillment and remarkable fortunes in assessing a critical management or business challenge and then identifying, courting, and eventually persuading exceptional people to answer that call. Over time, executive search consultants can help hiring organizations achieve a strategic leadership advantage over their competition. They discreetly facilitate a gradual commitment process between hiring organizations and proven business leaders, with all parties focused on how its eventual consummation will drive organizational performance. Executive recruiters infuse organizations with new leadership assets, and the best of them become trusted advisors to management with incredible insider access and unparalleled external influence over the course of organizational trajectory. However, the true potential of executive recruiters' work can only be realized if hiring organizations become smarter consumers of their services, and if individual executives engage them always for the good of the companies they steward, not to smooth the path for their own next career move. A look behind the curtain. This book raises the curtain on the challenges, agents, influence, and true potential of executive search consulting. It explores the growth, success, and wide acceptance of externally led executive management recruiting, as well as the nagging obstacles it faces and the missed opportunities on its record. This journey behind the scenes starts in Chapter 1, with a look at the global war for executive talent and the emerging market dynamics that are increasing expectations for the performance of corporate leadership at a time when executive tenure is in serious decline. Chapter 2 examines the end of management succession and executive recruiting as they've been known, and why organizations must improve on the status quo. Chapter 3 examines leadership at Disney, a fascinating case study that offers an unprecedented revelation of one company's approach to CEO succession. Chapter 4 follows the trail of the headhunters as it leads to some paradoxical challenges and explores the real identity problem facing those who facilitate the senior management succession process. Chapter 5 explores the key ingredients that may come to define both the challenge to executive leadership and its solutions. This discussion is followed, in Chapter 6, by an accounting of the true cost of a bad executive hire, in which the direct costs, double or triple that individual's annual salary, account for only 20% of the total damage to the organization's performance. Chapter 7 addresses the intersection of executive search and executive onboarding, an issue that hiring organizations must understand to hedge their sizable bets on leadership talent. These days, executives should expect well-planned support as they begin to tackle the challenges of a new senior management position. Chapter 8 speaks to the need for executive search consultants and those involved internally as parties to the executive search process to increase and improve their collaboration and demonstrate the impact of effective leadership recruiting. Those who truly understand the influence of leadership recruiters will relate to Chapter 9, which discusses executive search as the key to leadership diversity, and others will begin to realize the magnitude of their consultant selection decisions by listening in Chapter 10 about how to engage executive search consultants. The final chapter returns to the question of deciding who leads, examining best practices for senior management recruiting, and is intended to identify strategic priorities for hiring organisations as well as tactical advice for making the most of executive leadership recruiting and management succession. Chapter 1. The Global War for Executive Talent. No matter how good or how successful you are, or how clever or crafty, your business and its future are in the hands of the people you hire. Akio Morita, founder, Sony Corporation. Deciding who leads is the most important challenge of our times for organizations the world over, because the recruitment of senior executive management has the greatest bearing on the change that drives their financial performance. Executive search consultants, often called headhunters, are the ones who make it happen because organizations frequently turn to them to find new leadership. This decision is especially consequential because senior executives, more than any other employees, knit the fabric of employer culture into a coherent whole, mould the strategy that drives shareholder value, and set the rules that ultimately dictate the customer experience. They also sit in judgment about the kind of leaders who should be promoted or recruited into their ranks, thereby extending their imprint on the business and creating their professional legacy. Today's leaders require meaningful experience, sound judgment, a moral compass, and a strategic vision to meet the challenges presented by external variables such as customer satisfaction and retention, corporate social responsibility, government regulation, and, increasingly, media and investor calls for governance and ethics reform, among others. Those who would lead must be adept at handling the organizational challenges over which they can assert significant control. Growing net income, charting management succession, ensuring employee health, safety and engagement, building relations with workers' unions, protecting the data privacy rights of consumers, employees and recruits, growing the business, and generating and sustaining an acceptable long-term financial return to shareholders. The most visible leadership positions in any organization also create new role models, as well as an effective platform from which to attract new talent. All these factors may explain why the former treasurer of a major oil company, who moved on to a career in the executive search business, describes senior management talent as the new oil, hard to find, difficult to extract, and difficult to deliver. Whenever a key executive leaves, the company experiences a multiplier effect as other key contributors, including, invariably, others within the departed executive's trusted inner circle, leave or plan to depart ahead of the appointment of their boss's successor, who may come with plans to build and recruit a new cadre of trusted lieutenants and outside advisors. The cumulative effect of senior leaders' decisions will either elevate corporate performance or inhibit profit growth, degrade organizational culture, and dissuade the best and most promising senior management candidates from staying or accepting a position there. But the increasing pressure to make smart, informed, and sometimes very public decisions, and to embrace or adapt to the current business environment faster than the competition, has put senior leaders under a microscope. The constant demands of executive management make it easy to understand why executives want to be paid so much for sacrificing their life outside work, even if the record sums they demand seem outlandish to observers. Talent as CEO speak. Walk into a room full of business people these days, and it won't take long to discover who among them hold the title of Chief Executive Officer. They're the ones chatting about how important their best people are to their company's success, whispering in one another's ears that they constantly worry about their best people being recruited away to the competition, telling others that organizations that put people first finish first. insisting that world-class management leadership helps drive competitive advantage. Watch almost any television interview of a CEO or other leader, and invariably you'll see the interviewee bring the conversation around to the idea that people drive innovation and that innovation and hard work drive performance and profits. As one says, physical capital depreciates, human capital appreciates. Also consider the words of the 41st President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush. Get good people, delegate, and give them credit. And this from former management consultant and Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. The key to good management is hiring the right people and building the best team. Often the CEO makes talent and getting the right people in the right jobs the cornerstone of a corporate transformation plan, as McDonald's CEO Jim Skinner did when he took the reins in December 2004. One informal poll of corporate HR managers revealed that 88% of them were employed by a company whose CEO had said people are the organization's most important asset. But setting the course for organizational change, or even simply inspiring others to follow, requires more than words from the CEO. It's true that you can't acquire the mantle of corporate leadership without saying the right things, and competing with world-class talent is indisputably one of the smartest messages a CEO can trumpet. But the vision and message have to be supported and implemented across the organization. So smart leaders have communicated that talent, specifically the business of recruiting outstanding talent, is everyone's job. I talk about and think about people and succession every single day. We lead with people, says Susan Q. Hood, a vice president with the State Farm Insurance Companies. Succession and developing people probably is my number one important work when I look at all the things I do, she says. Radio advertisements for Saturn Corporation, the automobile manufacturer, tout its people-first focus, which differentiates the company through its unique customer experience and employment proposition. Bloomberg, a global provider of data, news and analytics, has invited talented individuals to consider its employment opportunities by emphasizing that our strength lies with our people. Such messages about people and effective management, intended for both internal and external audiences, paired with the example and vision provided by the CEO and other leaders, will ultimately determine whether a company becomes a talent magnet, giving it a recruiting and employee retention advantage over the competition, or a hunting preserve, rendering it vulnerable to constantly being raided by the competition for its best talent, thereby inhibiting its growth. But effective recruiting and management succession are two critical performance competencies precious few business leaders believe their organization has mastered. This may help explain why CEOs and other business leaders, including those who are only paying lip service to the talent issue, do so much talking about people, the workforce, and executive management. It also explains, in large part, why so many organizations have turned to business function outsourcing to bridge the talent gap. Maybe hearing themselves say that their organization wins with its people makes CEOs feel better about their organization's current state of affairs. They may hope that merely saying the right things will add some level of support or sophistication to their often ineffective recruiting process and underdeveloped management succession plan. A global challenge. The business of senior management recruiting changes everything. That's because authority over the vast resources of today's enterprises, financial capital, political capital, and human capital, often gives those in positions of power inordinate control over the destiny of an organization and the wealth, careers, and lives of a multitude of others who are influenced by their decisions. It has become increasingly clear that the victors in the war for executive recruitment, development, and retention will win in the global marketplace. The multinational companies and national economies of our world are moving towards a more congruous, interdependent and competitive global economy that draws on the skills and experience of knowledge workers wherever they, and the brightest market opportunities, reside. The truth is that we are all global consumers. Just think of the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the home electronics you use, and the goods you consume in the course of a day. No matter where you live, you likely own more internationally manufactured products than your parents did, and your children are exposed to more global products than you were at their age. We are also global citizens, and we're all part of a global talent market, one that places a significant premium on talented senior executives. The challenge for senior executives is to inspire, challenge, and lead people so that, no matter where they work and live, they want to compete and win as part of an organization that adds purpose and a sense of personal growth to their work life. The globalization of multinational companies largely results from their realization that the most promising consumer markets are found in the world's most populous nations, or in regions where governments, geographies, social customs, or cultural norms previously prevented such business expansion. Globalization is also the result of mergers and acquisitions and industry consolidation, driven partly by powerful forces outside the United States and Europe that are changing the complexion and the rules of engagement for many businesses. You are no longer competing just with the guy down the street, but also with people around the world. That's what IBM Senior Vice President Robert Moffat said in an interview with the New York Times about his company's decision to hire 14,000 new workers in India and lay off up to 13,000 workers in Europe and the United States. As workforces and consumer markets become more global and service businesses proliferate, CEOs worry about their ability to keep their scattered workforces nimble and strategically aligned to both the opportunities and the threats that arise from the global marketplace. The pressure to optimize workforce alignment requires the movement of management assets and forces executives to think at least 2 moves ahead when it comes to deploying talented business leaders. We have to be able to put bright talent and expertise where there's a need. We need to be able to move that talent around, says one corporate executive. The need to drive business on an international scale dictates the effective deployment of management talent inasmuch as it requires companies to talk to their customers, employees, and shareholders on a global scale. Consider the case of Mexican cement industry giant Cemex, which found that it had to translate its website into 18 different languages, in part because it operates in 50 countries around the world. The capacity to conduct business globally rests on individuals' willingness to follow opportunity and adapt to a new environment. Much in the same way, a German executive recently followed opportunity all the way to Shanghai, a new crossroads for international business. His sense of discovery was short-lived as he walked into a conference centre there to be greeted by a gathering of more than 5,000 of his countrymen. These days, opportunity attracts leaders like a magnet, no matter what the longitude and latitude. Cases in point. To gauge the globalization of business, consider the story of Avery Dennison Corporation. Founded in 1935 and based in Pasadena, California, Avery Dennison is a global leader in pressure-sensitive technology and innovative self-adhesive solutions for consumer products and label materials. It operates more than 200 facilities worldwide that manufacture products sold in 89 countries for the office, school, and home under the Avery brand. It also manufactures pressure-sensitive base materials, reflective and graphic materials, and performance polymers under the Façon brand. And its Retail Information Services unit provides retail and apparel manufacturing industries with a variety of price marking and brand identification products. Avery Dennison's other businesses produce postage stamps, battery labels, and performance films, as well as a variety of specialty tapes. The company tapped into a significant market in the United States over the years, but the lion's share of its recent growth has come from other markets. The makeup of its annual sales, as well as its overall workforce, has shifted significantly. Sales in 1995, $3.1 billion, 2000.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?